Now, October in the football season signals the annual start of the Kick It Out campaign to combat racism. Here to explain what this year's campaign will be doing is the chairman for Kick It Out, Lord Ousley. Thank you for coming in. Kick It Out, of course, marks its 20th anniversary this season. We want to ask you, what have you made of the changes in attitudes towards footballers from different backgrounds?
Well, we've come a long way in 20 years. 20 years ago, it was very difficult to go to football and not be abused or even attacked. Certainly harassed. But now I think the game has come to terms with the fact that after a lot of pressurising, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of soul-searching, that there's a recognition that something has to be done and something has been done. Essentially, we're about education, our campaign. It's about raising awareness, it's working with the next generation of fans and players, but also challenging unacceptable behaviour. And we're getting the regulation right now. The FA have solidified its regulations to tackle these problems, to issue sanctions that are meaningful, and that's now widened right across Europe, right across the world in terms of FIFA regulation. So I think what we're able to do is we can't solve the problem of prejudice in society, we can't solve the problems of bad attitudes, but what we're able to do now is to get more clubs to accept responsibility, to take action themselves, to tell people what is not acceptable and what is acceptable, and to take action themselves. There's still a lot to do, but football is a much more pleasurable experience, going to football and playing football at grassroots level and at the professional level, and that's where we really now need to take it to the next stage, and that's where we're at.
Well, this year's campaign has been called the Season of Action. How's this going to be different to what we've seen before? Well,
what we're hoping is that people don't think, well, during the 2 weeks in October, you get your banners out, you get the T-shirts out, you wave around saying this is what we do, we're against racism, we're against all forms of prejudice and discrimination, and then you put them away after the game and you say, we'll see you again next October. We're saying, look, this is something you've got to be on top of for the whole season, from day one right through to the end of the season. So it's an everyday thing. Prejudice doesn't happen throughout the year and you tackle it during 2 weeks. You tackle it all the time. You tackle discrimination all the time. And we've done a lot of hand-holding with clubs, and many have said, well, look, you know, it's time you let us go. It's time you didn't say just the 2 weeks in the year. We choose when we want to do things. And so, to some extent, they've got the option of doing nothing now. And what we're hoping is that they do something all the time, rather than, as I say, the one-off during October. And players themselves have said, look, you know, we don't like the idea of just wearing the T-shirts one day during the season and it's finished. This is an everyday thing. We face it in the dressing room, on the training ground, on the pitches, in our everyday life. It's an everyday struggle. So throughout the whole season, we want clubs to be taking action. And that's really what the Season of Action is about.
Of course, last season you had the Kick It Out T-shirts, which we regularly see. There were some players that chose not to wear those last season. Was that a hindrance to the campaign, or do you respect them for coming out and perhaps venting their frustrations in that manner of not wearing the T-shirts?
We've been saying for a long time, look, players, you've got power. Football is about playing. If you're not playing, there's no football. And if you stop playing, people want to know why. And we saw with Prince Boateng, when he walked off the pitch and said, I've had enough, I've complained to the referee twice about racial abuse, third time I'm off. He went off, all his colleagues on the pitch went off with him, there was no football. What did FIFA do? They panicked. Well, it wasn't panic, but they came to terms with the fact that we provided this guy with no protection. It's about time we stop footing around, take the necessary action to provide the protection. They had the protocols in place, but it wasn't happening. Now they've really gone over right up front saying we're going to kick national associations out of tournaments, we're going to deduct points, we're going to close grounds. And so the right reaction comes from taking action. And we were happy. Obviously it was frustrating because we were getting negative publicity, that guys were standing up and saying, look, we're not going to wear the T-shirts because not enough has happened. And why should we just put this on for one day when in fact we're frustrated by the lack of progress, and not just lack of progress of tackling racism, because you could see it has been, there have been a lot of activity around that, but opportunities to become coaches, opportunities to go into administration and management, opportunities within the wider game were foreclosed to them. And quite frankly, without that sort of action, you don't move forward. So I'd be happy to see players taking action, whether they're men or women or boys and girls, because it's the only way. If you rely on someone else to be doing it for you, it's not going to happen. And to some extent, Kick It Out has been a very convenient vehicle. And very often people say, well, we've got no problems at our club, but you're making all the problems. Well, when the guys stand up and have the courage to say, we've had enough, you've got to do something about this, that's really where we're at. So whilst it was a nuisance in terms of negative publicity, it was quite important that they demonstrated themselves their own frustrations and speak out. We gave them the opportunity to speak out. The T-shirts often opportunity. We haven't had any speaking out since, and we didn't have it before. So it's quite important.
I think one of the frustrations, though, having read Clark Carlisle's book, what the point he was trying to get across was, OK, yeah, complain at the time, but make sure you voice it all the year round as well. Don't just come to us in that week and refuse to wear your T-shirt when you haven't stood up and been counted throughout the year. So does that tie in as well with season of action?
It does, but it's also the articulation. Jason Roberts articulated what the problem was for him. Very few players were able to do that, and obviously he provided a bit of leadership because he was able to go to the FA, the Premier League, the PFA and say, look, this is my problem. And the problem is one that's faced by a lot of people, but I'm articulating it on behalf of myself. But it is right, you know, if you're facing problems in the dressing room, in the training ground, you know, that culture means you've got to keep it there. You can't talk out. You rely on being part of the team, and the management wants you to behave in a certain way. And if they describe you in a way that you're not happy with and you're not prepared to take it on because you're worried about the consequences, then nothing changes. And so there's a lot of frustration and built-up frustration there. And so it was quite important that someone like Jason Roberts spoke out, because he could articulate the frustration and take it to a higher level, to authorities, and speak to them. But it is right that, as Clark Carlisle says, this is an everyday thing. You face up to it. And there comes a time where you've got to speak out, but you don't then speak out and back away. You speak up and say, well, now we've got to change this, because the benefits are for everyone. When you change it, it's about tackling prejudice that makes the changes fair for everyone.
Technology, you're using that to help, I suppose, fans to report any sort of racial incidents. Just exactly how are you using that?
Well, we've introduced this fans app, which they can download onto their phones, and if they see something happening on the ground, it's largely for their own protection, because very often people are scared to report. And you can report an incident. It comes straight through to Kick It Out. We can activate it because you can put on your app, you know, where exactly in the ground is happening, seat numbers, that sort of thing, and it'll get full investigation, follow through. But it initiates action fairly quickly, especially if you're not prepared to report it to a steward, and a steward has the responsibility to take action. And so this is another way of ensuring that people know there is another route of reporting something, and very quickly, and being guaranteed that it will reach the proper processes, get into the proper process, and get a result.